These wild landscapes once stretched from coast to coast. Some of them still exist because more than any other nation, America has sought to preserve remnants of the world as it once was. In the 1960s and 70s, Idaho was a leader in protecting these special places, like the Selway River in north-central Idaho, and the soaring peaks and pristine lakes of the Sawtooth Mountains.
Designated wilderness is unique to America. We are the only nation that has designated wilderness. We say that we now value nature as it is, that nature has an inherent value to it that is separate from any economic value we place on that area.
There was a religious fervor to many of those early wilderness advocates, and they set limits on what we humans should do. Hiking, yes, by all means. Horseback, you bet. But no motors. Leave the mechanical devices at the edge. Translating such purity into law was, however, not always possible. Sometimes to secure wilderness protection, it meant grandfathering in primitive airstrips, or allowing jet boat traffic on certain sections of the Salmon River. But folks thought it was worth the trade-off, if only to protect vital watersheds, give wildlife a place to thrive, and provide a spiritual antidote for the ills of modern society. So, what have we learned in the 50 years since the passage of the Wilderness Act?
We get carried away with trying to put our values on a landscape, and I think that's the wrong thing to do. I think you have to take wilderness on its own terms. Wilderness is about what happens to the land when we step back and appreciate it and try to learn from it.
If the Wilderness Act movement is going to prevail and stay with us, it needs broad public support. And part of that is the public has got to be able to use it.
But 50 years ago, the wilderness movement did not anticipate the popularity of mountain bikes, which, because they are mechanized, are not allowed in wilderness areas. And this has led a younger generation to seek alternatives to wilderness.
Being able to designate monument status as opposed to wilderness, it gives you a lot more flexibility, and that's what you're seeing in the Boulder White Clouds.
And 50 years ago, wilderness advocates did not anticipate climatic conditions that bring devastating wildfires and an infestation of weeds. This has led some to call for a mix of human intervention and wild nature. Not exactly the traditional view of wilderness. In our most far-reaching production yet, Outdoor Idaho visits each of Idaho's wilderness areas.
Long way down.
50 years after the passage of the Wilderness Act, how are we doing? What, if anything, needs to change?
Funding for 50 Years of Wilderness is made possible by the Friends of Idaho Public Television, by the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore's legacy of helping to build the great state of Idaho, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding is provided by the Idaho Outfitters and Guides Association, committed to the conservation of Idaho's lands and waters, and by the Idaho Public Television Endowment.
It's been called an American invention, this concept of wilderness. In that respect, it's similar to another American invention, the national park. America setting aside the best of what defines us as a nation. In the 50s and 60s, Americans realized that wild, undeveloped landscapes were disappearing at an alarming rate, and that soon every nook and cranny on the continent could be touched by human endeavor. For some, the solution was something called designated wilderness, essentially taking public land out of the hands of federal agencies like the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, and protecting it by an act of Congress signed by the President.
To endure the political winds was going to take an act of Congress to set this up and not leave it just to the agencies to manage. And the whole emphasis behind the Wilderness Act was that leaving it to agency flexibility wasn't going to cut it. They didn't like it. They were opposed to wilderness right up till the bitter end. I would argue they saw the inevitability of it.